Hello, I'm Ion Politics reporter Jack Fink here on the CBS News Texas stream, and we're about 5 weeks away from the 2024 presidential election. Both candidates are fighting to keep and grow their support. In the presidential race in the Lone Star State, the average of the three most recent polls shows former President Donald Trump leading Vice President Kamala Harris by about 5.7 percentage points. The Texas Hispanic Policy Foundation survey shows Trump leading Harris 50% to 44%. There's a major debate still to take place this Tuesday, and that's the CBS News vice presidential debate between Democratic Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota and Republican Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio. And it comes as this race remains very close, particularly in the certain key states. Ahead of the debate, we wanted to know what issues mattered to you, the voter, the most. So we recently went to the Plano Balloon Festival to find out.
Get lighter.
You guys picked a great night. If you don't mind the heat, it's going to be a great weekend for the Balloon Festival.
Registered to vote? You voted?
Yes,
You are.
I'm voting for Kamala.
You're voting for Kamala Harris.
Yes.
All right. And are you guys? Well, how about you?
I'm her cousin. I'm from North Carolina.
Ah, okay.
She came a long way to be at the Balloon Festival.
All excited about the vice presidential debate?
Yeah, I love Tim Walz. I think he's great.
And
He legalized marijuana for his state.
you like that?
I do.
And so let me ask you, what do you want to hear in that debate? What do you think that debate's going to be like?
Ooh, I think we're going to hear a lot of untruths from one side and a lot of rebuttals from the Democratic side.
And not a lot of people know who these folks are, right? I mean, they're not household names, Tim Walz and J.D.
Yeah,
Vance.
unfortunately.
What do you think of that?
I think it's unfortunate because I think that each one brings something, to their campaign, good or bad.
Hot one out here.
It is. It's very warm.
Welcome to Texas. We're from CBS News Texas.
Yes.
You all set to vote?
Yes.
Have you made up your mind?
I'm really having a tough time.
Really? Why is it so? I mean, because everybody knows the choices.
This to be.
You don't want this to be on TV?
Right. I don't love my choices.
And so you're struggling.
Struggling.
Yeah. Are you going to watch the vice presidential debate?
Yes, I watch every debate.
And what do you think that's going to be like? Because not a lot of people know who J.D. Vance is
Or
and
Tim Walz. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I'm going to watch it. I don't miss a debate.
And you're really going into this eyes wide open if you haven't made up your mind.
Exactly.
What do you think is going to be that determining factor for you to make up your mind?
I love the values and what one of the candidates has done, but I don't like his personality, his meanness,
You like the policies.
the rhetoric.
You like the policies,
Yes.
but not the person.
Correct.
And so that's the struggle.
That's the struggle.
And how do you think you're going to solve that?
I don't know. I have a few weeks
To be determined.
to be determined.
Honestly, I'm voting for God. If I could register and vote for God, I would do this.
Are you set to vote? Are you registered?
I am totally registered to vote. I'm definitely registered and looking forward to it.
And how important is this election to you?
Probably the most important one in my lifetime.
Why?
I feel like we're at a crossroads as a country, and I think it's going to go one of two directions. My deal is I just want everybody to know the facts, not all the personalities and things like that. Just want them to know the facts and just almost a line-by-line breakdown of the difference between the two parties.
And so let me ask you, are you going to be watching the vice presidential debate?
I'll be watching everything.
Everything.
I'm into it.
So what do you think that's going to be like? Because not everybody knows who Tim Walz and J.D. Vance are.
I do a little research, and actually I feel like J.D. Vance is going to hold his own.
When we come back, what the experts will be looking for during the CBS News debate. Welcome back to the CBS News Texas stream. Let's get back to the discussion now on this Tuesday's vice presidential debate on CBS News. I recently had the chance to sit down with Dr. Ben Voth, director of debate at SMU, to discuss what he will be looking for during the debate. Dr. Ben Voth, director of SMU debate. Welcome to Eye on Politics.
Great to be here, Jack.
So here we go. We have the vice presidential debate. What sticks out most about this debate?
Well, I think both of these debaters are actually fairly different from their lead presidential candidates. I think there's a lot more potential here for incisive clash on the issues. And the other thing is just that the situation is such that the election race overall is so close and just keeps getting closer. I think that it makes this debate exceptionally important.
Why? I mean, let's talk about the fact that the race is so tight. I mean, normally a vice presidential debate not as important as a presidential debate. So why do you think it'll make a difference?
Well, I think, again, because it is so close, any little nudge can make a difference. And both of these candidates have come in kind of, I think, late to this process where we're still kind of getting to know who they are. And so I think there really is potential for them to nudge the race, 1 or 2 degrees. And that is, because we are in such a close race, that was all it would take for either Harris or Trump to kind of gain a lot out of it. Both men have done some debating in recent past, and I think sometimes people forget that, for example, in 2008, the Palin-Biden debate ended up being one of the most watched debates in presidential history, even though it was a vice presidential debate. And most of the time we expect them to be smaller audiences, things like that. But this might be a similar large event.
So do you expect this to be attack, attack, attack?
I think there will be a lot of attack. I think there's been a lot of fodder that's already created by Harris-Trump. I mean, we just had the debate between them really just like a couple of weeks ago. It created a lot of fodder. I mean, there's some things out of Springfield, Ohio, which Vance is from, where there was a lot of controversy in that debate where probably there's going to be charges back and forth about some of that content. And the fact that, again, Vance is from Ohio, and some of the Springfield controversy where, yeah, there are roughly 20,000 Haitian immigrants that have come into that community. That's a pretty hot commodity in the overall election debate. Lots of arguments about whether it's false about the cats and dogs and things like that. So there's a lot of strange things that are in the air for the 2 vice presidential candidates to swat at pretty vigorously.
I mean, there were reports of the fact that there were attacks on animals, but nothing has ever been proven about this at all, and yet this issue still has legs.
Right, and I think Vance had a very big role in that because he's still senator from Ohio. According to him, he was trying to represent his constituents, and so there were reports that he was relaying, but he's a big driver to the cats and dogs story, and so I would be surprised if they just kind of let that go in this vice presidential debate.
Fact-checking also became very much a controversy in the past presidential debate. What impact do you think that could have on this debate?
Well, I really think fact-checking is kind of in what I would call a pendulum swing, where in the CNN debate on June 27th, there was very little fact-checking. And we know from the interviews that were done after the debate with the ABC moderators, they felt like there was too little fact-checking in the June 27th debate. Now, I think in the aftermath of the September 10th debate, there's kind of a similar backlash against ABC where they did 5 fact checks of Trump, but 0 of Harris. And so I think we're going to either see less fact checking in this round or a more balanced fact checking that maybe tries to fact check Walz as well as Vance.
And picking up on what you said about fact checking, is this normally something historically that has come up in debates?
Yeah, it's honestly a very sensitive issue, and it's one which the campaigns typically will negotiate about. And there's still a lot of struggle about like what were the negotiations, for example, on the September 10th ABC debate. But again, just from a purely abstract debate standpoint, as a director of debate, you really wouldn't normally in a debate have fact-checking live during a debate. That could happen with the judge after the debate. And then the other thing that is sort of self-evident is that the debaters can check each other during the debate. They can make arguments to each other. But the moderator role is somewhat intrusive, and it probably originated with Candy Crowley in the 2012 debate series between Romney and Obama.
So what does each candidate need to do to win this?
Yeah, in order to win, I think that Vance probably needs to put to rest kind of that cat-dog controversy that kind of swirls around him and try to establish himself as a reliable purveyor of the arguments that he's making. He also probably wants to try to demonstrate some synchronicity with the head candidate. He sort of recently had said that he was out of step with Trump and kind of misspoke on some issues. And so showing kind of his allegiance to the lead, I think is going to be important for him. I think for Walz, I think he wants to surpass kind of the expectation that he's created, that he's kind of not very good at debating. He told the Harris campaign that one of his limitations was that he wasn't very good at debate. I personally watched him on his governor debate last night and thought he did pretty good, but I think he'll want to demonstrate that he can go toe-to-toe with a Yale law graduate and master kind of the substantive debate elements and be a strong asset to the Harris campaign.
What issues do you expect to be at the fore?
Well, I still think we're going to hear a lot about immigration and the economy. And so I think the plans that the two campaigns might have for reducing inflation might be important. I do think the immigration controversy continues to rate pretty high in voter surveys of like top issues. And so, of course, that Springfield, Ohio controversy where there are thousands of Haitian immigrants that were placed into that community of about 50,000 people. And so, and Vance being from Ohio, I would expect they're going to clash on that. And really, Walz being from Minnesota and governor of Minnesota, there are a lot of similar Midwestern dynamics between the two states. And so there is a good way for the two men to kind of talk to each other about like, well, Ohio does this or Minnesota does this, and clash on how should immigrants be treated as they're kind of released into different states and things like that.
How important is it for these candidates to answer questions directly from the moderator? Because we saw some examples where that did not happen. Does that really have an impact on viewers?
I think it does have some impact. I do think viewers are attuned to the fact that they're not answering the question. Now, having said that, it's a very common problem where politicians, not just in debates, but in regular journalistic interviews, they don't answer the question. And so there may be an agenda, I mean, almost certainly there is, that they want to pursue apart from what the journalist is asking about. And so they will try to pursue that. But I do think that all candidates get dinged when they fail to answer the question. And it does become sport for the partisans on the other side where they say, hey, look, they didn't answer that question, or they're afraid to answer that question. It shows.
And is that something that the candidates themselves should be bringing up? In other words, if their opponent isn't doing that?
Right, and again, for me as a debate person, that's what I would like to see. I'd like to see the debaters point out where they think that their opponent is failing to answer. And again, when I watch Vance in his Senate debate and Walz in his governor's debate, I saw both of them doing that. And that's where I think they do have, to my mind, a more practical skill set to enact this in front of television cameras and call each other to task and say, hey, notice that the candidate didn't answer that question. I think I saw both of them do that, like in the last 2 years, both in the governor's race and in the Senate race. So I think that'll be interesting that they probably will do that in this vice presidential debate to come.
And do you find that, at least with the last debate, there's a lot of blame on the moderators? And at the end of the day, do you believe it's the candidates themselves that have to own it?
Well, that's always at root the issue, that the candidate will have to own, no matter what the situation is. Because you sometimes even have cynics who say, well, you should not have agreed to the debate if you thought the moderators were that difficult. Now, I do think there's some probability that Vance is likely to get into rhetorical combat with the moderators based on the September 10th debate with ABC and just the habits that he's shown on television shows already with interviewing. So that doesn't mean that they won't do it, but I think ultimately, yeah, the candidates are responsible for whatever their arguments are, and they're not really going to be let off the hook because the moderator is difficult. And in fact, the truth is that if the moderator is difficult, if they answer the question well, then they're going to score higher. So ultimately, the rhetorical assignment is really going to rest with the candidate, no matter how difficult the moderators are.
I was just going to ask, how does that impact the candidate if they're jousting with a moderator? I guess it depends on their level of their supporters, right?
Right, and that's where I think it's interesting that Vance's sparring partner is Pete Buttigieg, who's actually sort of famous for going on Fox News into sort of a hostile media setting. I think that's a good model where if candidates are practicing with journalists that they think are antagonistic, I mean, for me as a debate coach, that would be the best practice for giving a good answer. And so you want to have, even if the moderators are, in your view, being antagonistic, you want to rise to that occasion, and that's your best opportunity to score points because the audience is going to see both ends of that dynamic.
And my last question is something that you said before, the fact that these are not very household name people. We're talking about Tim Walz, we're talking about J.D. Vance. What impact does that have on turnout and viewership for these debates?
Well, it's interesting, in the history of presidential debates, the vice presidential debates tend to be watched about half as much as the presidential debates. So that would mean that they might get like 30 million viewers. It could be less, could be lower, toward 20 million. But it's important to understand that even at those low numbers, that's bigger than almost any blockbuster TV show. It's bigger than anything the two men have ever encountered. Certainly their governor's races or Senate debates on television didn't attract nearly that many viewers. And so it's going to improve their national stock by a wide margin, more than almost anything else they could do in a TV campaign ad or even just going on a television show for an interview. There's going to be a minimum of 20 to 30 million viewers. We know that in the September 10 debate, there were about 67 million viewers watching that debate. So I wouldn't personally be shocked if there were 50 million viewers to this, just because the race is so tight and people are really trying to figure out, you know, which way this is going to go. And this debate's going to be important insight for this event and in the election. So this is a huge opportunity for these relative unknowns from Ohio and Minnesota to become national names.
Dr. Ben Voth, Director of Debate at SMU, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
You're welcome, Jack. Really enjoyed it.
What local party leaders are saying about the vice presidential debate when we come back. Us, what the voters and the experts will be looking for. We hear from local party leaders to see what they're expecting. I sat down with the chairs of the Dallas County Democratic and Republican parties. The vice presidential candidates will square off for their first and only debate on CBS News this Tuesday night, October 1st. CBS Evening News anchor and managing editor Norah O'Donnell and Face the Nation moderator Margaret Brennan will serve as the debate moderators. The face-off between Democratic Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Republican Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio comes as the presidential race remains so close in the seven battleground states where the race will likely be won. And here to talk about the debate and the presidential and U.S. Senate races in Texas is Cardall Coleman, chair of the Dallas County Democratic Party, and retired Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, chair of the Dallas County Republican Party. Welcome to both of you. We appreciate it. Welcome to Eye on Politics. And so we're going to start with the debate, and I want to know what each of you thinks. What are you each expecting? Cardall, we'll start with you.
Look, I expect a spirited debate. I think that Tim Walz is prepared. He's prepared to lead the country. And that's no question from the voters who are going to watch this. If you watch the presidential debate, you saw leadership on the stage. And I think you'll see more of that shining from the administration, or a hopeful administration, of Harris-Walz.
Alan.
Well, I tell you, I am much more relieved that it's not Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, as the vice presidential nominee. But glaringly, what we will see is that here you have an enlisted Marine who did answer the call of service for his country and went to Iraq. And you have an enlisted soldier, I hate to say this, that did not answer that call and for whatever reason abandoned his unit. And so that is something that will be very glaring. But also I think that Governor Walz is going to have to answer about his time as governor with the economic situation in Minnesota, where you have the highest corporate income tax rate in the country, 9.8% for a state, and you have the sixth highest personal income tax rate for a state in the United States of America. So I think that there will be some glaring differences.
Do you expect the differences in service? I mean, Governor Walz did serve 24 years in the Minnesota Guard. So do you expect that to be an issue?
Yeah, because, you know, you can serve, but when you get that call to go and leave your family and go to maybe make that last full measure of devotion, to not do that, that is something that we in the military take, you know, as a very stickling point. And the reason that he gave was that, you know, he had to step down so that he could run for office. As a National Guardsman, a reserve component member, he did not have to step down to do that. He could have gone and deployed and still been able to run for office.
Cardall, what do you make of that? argument.
Also, Army veteran myself, I full well understand this. Think that, you know, people who step up to serve in our country should be commended as such. And so, you know, when we see this debate, it'll be a debate about perspective, right? A debate about how do you serve, and not everyone who serves in the military, that's not the full stop of how we serve our country, for those who serve in public office or elected office. So I think all of that will come to bear in this debate.
And talk to me before you called it spirited. Isn't this going to be pretty combative because they're going to attack the other presidential candidate, right? Isn't this going to be not just attacking each other, but attacking the person at the top of the ticket? Well,
look, President Biden just a few months ago asked that we lower the temperature with the political rhetoric. And I think that that's happened on both sides. And so I think that happened even in the presidential debate. And so I don't know that we'll see a lot of attacks. We have two individuals who know how to who know how to get their point across in an articulate way, both candidates. And so I think we'll see that. And the hope for the American people is that we won't see so many attacks. I think the American people are over the infighting, and then fighting in the public square. And so we have to get back to solutions and get over the rhetoric.
And I think that's an important job of the moderators. The moderators should make sure that we're focusing on those top issues for the American people. Without a doubt, it's the economy. It's without a doubt our energy security, our national security, foreign policy, our domestic security. Here we are in the Dallas, Texas area, and we come to find out that we have this Venezuelan gang, Tren de Aragua, that is operating here. I think that's a big concern, and we see what's going on in the south side of Chicago, where now you have a gang turf war. But I think that those are the things that the moderators should be focusing on, and making sure that people answer the questions instead of, you know, maybe trying to sideswipe each other and not answer the questions, because that's what the American people want to know.
So what does each candidate, what does your candidate need to do to win this debate?
I think on our side with J.D. Vance, he has to defend those policies. He has to talk about the economic policies. He has to talk about that record. He has to talk about that seminal question that Ronald Reagan asked, you know, so many years ago: are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And get to the heart of that. Let's talk about the chaos and confusion that we see all across the globe. I was not really happy to see a United States Air Force C-17 bringing over the president of Ukraine and really taking a kind of a political stance. Let's talk about how we got into these situations around the globe. And let's talk about how we can restore our energy independence, which I think is very important for us here in Texas.
And my last question on this debate, and that is, as you know, the race is so close. I mean, if you look at the battleground states right now, it's 2 percentage points and less than that in the states, in these 7 battleground states. And so I'm wondering, how crucial is this debate in this overall fight? Because there are only 5 weeks left to Election Day, just about.
I think it's very crucial. You know, it will model what way this country decides to go, right? What level of temperament, what type of leadership do we really want to see our country have for the next 4 years? And so we ask, what is it that we need to see from Tim Walz? We need to see who he's always been, right? See who he's been to the people of Minnesota. If that's as personable as Coach Walz, something that we can all resonate with, or a governor who has made sure that every child had a meal to eat and no one went hungry in this state. Those are the things, those kitchen table conversations and ability to connect with everyday people that we want to see, that the American people deserve to see.
And I think that one of the things about Tim Walz, you know, if you look at some of the polling, Kamala Harris has lost about 5 to 6 percentage points in Minnesota since he was named as her vice presidential nominee. So I think it is important for him to show that he can be a good wingman, just the same as with J.D. Vance, that he can show that he'll be a good wingman for President Trump.
So let's move on and talk about the U.S. Senate race here in Texas. And there's a new development that just came out, and that is the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee is now going to be injecting millions of dollars into Colin Allred's bid to unseat Senator Ted Cruz. And so, Alan, I want to start with you on this. How big of a deal is this, and how concerned does this make you?
Well, it's a huge deal. I mean, we saw a little bit of this when former Congressman O'Rourke ran, but I think there's a little bit of difference between how former Congressman O'Rourke approached this race than what I see with Colin Allred. You know, O'Rourke was everywhere. There are 254 counties in the state of Texas, and I believe that he just about hit every single one. I don't think we see that so much from Colin Allred, a lot of advertisements and things of this nature. So I think that they really want to make the point that Texas is in play. I don't know if that's going to be possible because, again, it's about the East Texas and West Texas, the shoulders that prop it up. But when you look at our major urban population centers, I think that's where they're hoping to get the most play out of Representative Allred, potentially winning that Senate seat.
Cardall.
Listen, I have a chance to talk to my colleagues around the state, other county chairs, even in rural spaces, right? And so I think the Allred campaign is making its way around to those places, but also Texas is just a huge land block. And so to be able to communicate with everybody, you have to use the power of the airways. You have to mail some of those traditional campaigning points. And so to be able to get that message across, you know, it is a large state to be able to travel.
And so this, you know, people always ask me about this race, and, you know, this is different. 2024 is obviously very different than 2018. And so I'm wondering, in 2018, we saw, you know, Aurora came very close, you know, less than 3 percentage points. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's going to be that close again in this year, which is, you know, not a very great year for Democrats as 2018 was?
There's ability for it to be close and for the gap to absolutely close. We saw Congresswoman Liz Cheney touring Texas with Colin Allred, something that the likes that we've never seen before, a bipartisan tour during an election, and a member of Congress from another state who, from the other side of the aisle, endorsing Colin Allred.
Yeah, okay.
Colin Allred.
Yeah.
I was going to say senator. Don't want to be presumptuous there. Colin Allred. So making sure that we talk to every voter, not just the ones on the Democratic side of the aisle, but making sure we're talking to those who are questioning, does this party still share my values? Do I have a place here? And making sure that everyone feels welcomed.
How big of a deal was that endorsement, do you think? And is that going to make a difference?
You know, it's funny because I was just out in Wyoming last week in Sheridan, Wyoming, and I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference. If anything, it's a head scratcher when Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney are out there, because once upon a time, the Democrat Party referred to Dick Cheney as Darth Vader. So if it's more about personality than policy, I think that's a big question. But, you know, when I look at what is going to be happening, we got a debate coming up between Mr. Allred, Congressman Allred, and Senator Cruz. I think that that's going to be a very big deciding factor because, again, let's get these two individuals together and let's have the debate on policy and let's have the debate on what policies are best for the state of Texas and the United States of America.
And what issues, you know, do you think, I mean, again, I would imagine the economy, what's the answer for inflation, border security, but abortion is also an issue in Texas.
Absolutely.
So what do you make of that, and how are they going to each try to win that? Because the race is down to about 5 percentage points with Cruz leading.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about a woman's right to choose, it's not just as cut and dry as the conversation around abortion. We have to talk about IVF and the ability to family plan for individuals who want that. Then also we have to talk about Texas and where it stands as far as maternal mortality compared to the rest of the country. So I think Colin Allred does a masterful job in being able to communicate with individuals. He has a young family himself, and so being able to communicate with individuals who are have young families or working on family planning, I think that's where he shines the most.
You know, I'm very pleased with what I see here in Texas as far as this. I just had a grandson who is now 11 months old that was born at 29 weeks. My daughter, who is a neonatologist, she suffered from gestational hypertension. I think that that's what we should be focusing on. Cures for ovarian cancers, cervical cancers, uterine cancers, breast cancers, those gestacular issues that affected my daughter. And to see a 3-pound, 2-ounce-old baby now to be 22 pounds in less than a year, I think that we do have some things that we can applaud with what's happening with our children and raising up our children in some very tough healthcare situations here in the state of Texas.
Why do you think this race has become so competitive? Because everybody always says, well, Texas is a red state, So what's going on here on the ground? How motivated are Republicans?
Well, I mean, again, you look at the spine of I-35 from Denton all the way down to San Antonio. You look at Houston-Harris County. You look at El Paso County. Democrats have done very well in the major urban population centers. I just got back in, as you know, from my hometown of birth, Atlanta, Georgia, and you see the same thing in Georgia, a red state, 159 counties, but yet 5 or 6 counties are, very much so in the blue column, and that has a big effect on what you saw. And now you have Senators Warnock and Ossoff. So I think that playbook is exactly what the Democrat Party would like to see here in Texas, controlling some of these major urban population centers, going out and get X amount of percentage of vote in rural areas and be able to flip a state like Texas.
Cardall, let me ask you a different question. How big of an impact has the fact that Vice President Kamala Harris is the nominee now, top of the ticket? What impact has that had on the race here in Texas?
It's made the world of difference.
How?
Week to week, we see hundreds, both Wednesdays, Sundays, Thursdays, hundreds of volunteers coming to volunteer at our county headquarters and at our satellite offices, whether that's phone banks for Kamala, calls for Kamala, which we call it, block walking, letter writing. So we've had a groundswell of volunteers and people who are energized, those who've not been with us in a while, right? Those who have not really participated since 2008, and then a bunch of new faces. So I think it's made the world a difference in fundraising ability and volunteer recruitment as well.
So let's talk about the presidential race. Why is it that we are seeing Trump have a bigger lead over Harris in Texas than Cruz has over Allred? What's that about?
Well, I think without a doubt there's a little bit of down ballot problems, and we saw that back some time ago when Senator Ted Cruz ran previously, that he underperformed from a national level. And I think that comes back to him having to get out and do a little bit better in presenting himself. There are some things about Senator Cruz can rub people the wrong way. There's no doubt about that. But I believe that in the end, those coattails that President Trump has will help him here. I don't think it'll be a 2.3% margin, but it will definitely be somewhere less than 6% with Senator Ted Cruz in this race.
What do you say?
Congressman Allred has crossover appeal, and I think that's what's making a difference. Going back to my comment about Congresswoman Cheney being in Texas, there are a number of people who I've encountered who are Republican who say, I plan to vote for Colin Allred. Right? And so I think that's the difference. He has crossover appeal. He lives at the point of many intersections, being a former voting rights attorney, NFL player, and then also being a young man from Dallas who has a young family. I think that really resonates with a lot of people here.
I want to go further down ballot because there are some state races that we are watching very closely, and that is 2 House seats that Republicans still have, and that is Morgan Meyer in House District 108 and Angie Chen Button in House District 112. Where do you see those races going? Cardall, we'll start with you.
Look, Avery Bishop is extremely popular in 112.
And she's running against Angie Chen Button.
She's running against Angie Chen Button. Her ability to connect with people is something that I've not really seen before, whether that's on social media where she has over 1 million followers or just being able to genuinely connect in person. So these are the points I think people are ready for elected officials and politicians that give us a sense of normalcy, right? Enough of the confusion and the chaos, getting back to a sense of normalcy and someone that we can genuinely connect with. Same thing with Elizabeth Ginsburg in House District 108, the nominee there. She is a person who everyone loves to connect with. And so I think that's the difference that you see with people getting out to support these individuals.
Alan?
I think that Morgan Meyer and Angie Chen Button will be successful and be able to pull things out. And one of the reasons is you've seen an incredible shift in the Texas State House. You know about the 12 to 13 races where incumbents in our primary lost. And I believe that, these incumbents now have seen that, we've got to stand up for the right things that are aligned with these Texas values. Our border security is very important. The fact that we had legislation in the Texas State House in the last session that would have precluded a country like China, our #1 geopolitical foe, from coming in and buying up land, that failed in the Texas State House. I think that many of the members on the Republican side got that message that we need to protect Texas. And so we will make sure that those people are returned back to those seats to do exactly that.
Do you think that it helps that the districts the Republicans were given a little bit more room as far as their districts are concerned. I mean, all the incumbents really were, Democrats too.
Yeah, sure. I think it does help, but I also will say be on the lookout for maybe some surprises, some upsets, because, you know, John June, who is running in an open seat, and he is a Korean Army veteran, Navy veteran, I'm sorry, and then also Stephen Stanley, who's running against Retta Bowers. You could see some upsets there as well.
Cardall.
Well, look, we've been working all year long. It didn't just start this summer. It didn't start with the announcement of Kamala Harris. We've been knocking doors, talking to voters, talking to our neighbors. And our candidates are working very hard to make sure that they're meeting people right where they are, speaking in their languages. And so I think you'll see the results of that come November.
All right. Well, Alan West, Cardall Coleman, thank you both so much. We really appreciate you stopping by Eye on Politics.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you for having me.
CBS News will host the only planned vice presidential debate between Senator Vance and Governor Walz on Tuesday, October 1st at 8 o'clock Central, right here on CBS News Texas and CBS News 24/7. Download the free CBS News app for live coverage, post-debate analysis, comprehensive fact checks, and more. Thanks for watching. I'm Eye on Politics reporter Jack Fink. Have a great day.